Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This is Dr. Hawthorn here, and today we are very excited because we are finally reaching the final episodes of Blender tutorial. Although these 5 episodes of Blender tutorial is not very in-depth, but after today, you are finally able to do some modeling, texturing, lighting, and rendering. Very excited, right? Now, let's go to the software and do some work. We are back in Blender. This is how we left off last time. We have a scene of a chair and table, a lamp, a few lights, and also a curved round background, which is for the studio rendering. But before we introduce the two render engine, I would like to teach you how to frame our camera first. First of all, we need a camera on the scene, and we do have one by default, which is here. And then, if you have the numpad, you can press 0 on the numpad. Or if you want, you can also click on this button to turn on the camera view. Now, you can see that we have the camera view in the center of the screen, and then around it is a darker gray area, which is also showing you what is on the scene but is not framed in the camera. Usually, by default, we have camera view toggled here, and if we just rotate around the viewport, you will spin out of the camera. This is not very handy if you want to just do a little bit of the adjustment of the camera, right? Of course, you can just pick on the camera using grab to grab things around or rotate, and then we press 0 again to see the camera view. But as you can see, a random grabbing, meaning that the objects that you want to focus on can be getting out of frame. If we want to just do a small or a subtle adjustment on the camera view, what we can do is press N on the keyboard, turning on view and lock camera to view. When it is on, you can just pan the camera, rotate the camera, or zoom in and out of the camera, like how you navigate the viewport. But also remember that if you desire this position, remember to unlock the camera to view option, because whenever it is like this, and especially when we have a magic mouse, it's very easy to spin out of the camera. When we spin out with the camera view locked, it means that you're changing the position of camera very easily, which is very not ideal. When you achieved a desired position of the camera, remember to unlock it. When it's unlocked, as you spin out, you see the camera is not moved and is not rotated. It will keep the position of the camera on the screen. But of course, as you progress in Blender, you may find that locking the camera view here and switching to camera view to rotate around is still a bit more difficult than navigating within the viewport directly. Here is the other option of placing the camera, is that you can do whatever you want just to navigate around like this, to look for the spots that you think might be the best to render, for example like this, and then we can choose View, Align View, and align active camera to view. When you do that, you see that the camera is placed exactly at the spot that you want to have on the viewport. And now, with this very same angle, you can lock the camera to view again and just do zoom out and pan a little bit. The adjustment is much more simpler than having the camera view on, lock camera to view, and do all the rotation and grabbing or the transformation of the camera as you please. So, what is active camera? If you record here, we can align active camera to view. In Blender, we have this option of having endless amount of lights, endless amount of camera. For example, let me just add another camera which is here now, and this is positioned right below the lamp, which is not very desired. I can just move the camera back a little bit and show you what an active camera is. Now, we have two cameras on the scene. One is here. If we press on 0, we can see this camera. And then through this lens, we can see another camera, which is just added, and it is non-active. So what is active camera? We can come to this layout here to see the two cameras side by side. One is highlighted while the other one is not highlighted on the icon. Which one is highlighted is called the active camera. If I now press this unhighlighted icon, I'm changing the camera view to the new camera. This is how we can switch active cameras and place on different positions. For example, now I'm having the second camera as the active camera, and I'm positioning it like this. I can choose view, align active camera to view, and now I have another angle of shooting the scene. Camera 1, camera 2. Now we can talk about the two render engine. For now, as we spin around the viewport, we can see a lot of grains on the viewport, right? Because we are having the render preview on and we are spinning around the viewport. And this is because we are using the cycle render engine, which is a very photorealistic render engine. It has the ray tracing, or we call it path tracing. So we have all the reflection of the light and the refraction of the glass very realistically rendered. And it is physically accurate. But it takes time. Usually, it has a lot of noise and we need to denoise it. To quickly have a fast render for preview and also to have something like easy to work with in game engine, we have the EEVEE render engine, which is called Extra Easy Virtual Environment Engine. This is a fast render engine that doesn't take more than 1 minute to render one image, although some of the lighting, reflection, and refraction of the meshes on the scene cannot be realistic enough. Just to name a few, there are at least three things that will be more challenging if we are using EEVEE engine, and we will choose cycle over it. First is shadow catcher. For example, if we don't want to render this scene on this curved mesh as the background, but to put a photo behind and just to have the photo as the setup of the scene, the meshes we are creating as the objects, the photorealistic shadow underneath the objects. These we will use shadow catcher to stimulate the shadow look of the objects. These work better in cycle. Second, we have the glass material and the emission material. Of course, we can all do this by baking the material in EEVEE, which we will talk about this more in detail in the future. But for now, as a beginner, when we are doing setup of the scenes like this, it is easier if we are using cycle render engine. Third is the panoramic render. Panoramic renders are HDRI that can be put in virtual reality or 3D virtual tour. These renderings requires cycle render engine as we change the camera type to panoramic camera. Now, let's change back to the cycle render engine and do a rendering. When we change back to cycle render, we will see there are some options underneath. First, the sampling. We have to see there are two categories that are very important. One is the viewport, and the other one is the render. What matters now is the render option, of course, because when we look at this panel here and the viewport is whatever the setting we set here is only affecting what we see on the viewport now. We don't need to turn on the noise because it's just the viewport. And if we turn it on, of course the grains we are seeing here will be gone but it takes more time for the computer to just generate the view. So it doesn't matter now because we don't have a complicated scene. What we need to do is turn on the render panel here, and then we can see if the denoise option is on. When it is on, usually if we do the rendering now, it will run the render. But if we are doing the render now, for example, how do we do the render? It's under this render type, and we will choose render image. We are not choosing render animation because we are not creating a timeline, we are not creating a video clip. We are rendering image. When it is selected, you will see another window popping up, and probably this scene is very easy. It's not heavy on the computer, but if you are creating a heavier scene, you will want to leave the computer be. As you can see, I have some running sushi on the top. It's showing you how the CPU or the GPU is being used. Of course, the device we are now using is the CPU device. The CPU is running crazy now. The faster my sushis are, the faster the CPU is running. And if we are working on the computer with other heavy software, it will crash the software here. We don't want to do that. We don't want to touch that. As you can see, we are rendering and the number of time is counting. Now it's almost 1 minute, and you can see that it's still leaving quite some time. We are using at least 23 minutes to render this image, which is definitely too much. Before Blender 3.0, we did not have this function of setting a time limit, which is available now, and it is here. For now, the time limit is 0 seconds, which is no limit. It's going to take all his time to render the entire image and denoise the entire image, but this is a waste of time because usually we are not creating an image that is overcomplicated. And for fast rendering, I would suggest we start with 2 minutes or 3 minutes. Make sure you also type in the unit, because if we just type in 3, it means 3 seconds. If we type in 3M, it is 3 minutes. After we set the time limit, we can run the render again. Now, you can see that the remaining time is only less than 3 minutes. It will also show you how much the memory is being used and how much is the maximum of it being used. And you can see that the sample is counting. The maximum is 4096, but we are not reaching this high. We are just reaching 3 minutes of the samples that is calculated. After everything is done, and after 3 minutes, it will show us done. And when it is done, what we can do is to go under image and save as the image in the position or in the location of the camera of the computer you desired. It's done. You can go under image and save as. Go to the final destination that you desired, name your file, and save as image. Or you can also create new folder here, just like all the options that you can find in the Finder. After that, I want to show you also output properties. Output properties, you can change the resolution of your renderings. For example, now I have 1920 times 1080. This is the full HD dimension, and this is how I usually do my renderings. And this, we can easily render any full HD image of your desire. You can also set up the output. And for example, if I am creating a larger scene and if I am creating panoramic rendering, I would also use the Render Plus Batch add-on. And this is an add-on that I would use all the time if I'm creating a research project. We're creating the virtual environment of an interior place, because we can add all the camera we have on the scene in the queue. And then with one click, I can just go to sleep in peace. Tomorrow as I wake up, all the renderings will be ready. the last thing I want to show you here today is the camera properties. And to see that, we have to select one of the cameras. I'm selecting the second one. And as you can see here, we have the camera properties panel here. It's unlike how we select a mesh, we have the material properties. But if we're selecting a camera, we have the camera property. And here you can see the types of camera. And the first one we have here, or by default, we are adding into the scene is the perspective camera. And the perspective camera meaning how we usually take photos. We are using our perspective view. This is like when we are taking our smartphone in front of us and then just place it in front of any objects that we want to take photos of. And now we can also change the focal length. For example, if I'm taking a photo of this scene, I'm using by default the 50mm focal length. But we can also change it to a wider lens. For example, if I'm changing it to the 25mm lens, as you can see, I haven't moved the camera, but I'm changing to another lens so I can include more stuff in the scene. If we are doing rendering inside a narrow room or a very closed environment, we can also reduce the focal length to take photo of more objects instead. This is very much like using a real camera in reality. Now, let's change it back to 50. We can also use the option of depth of field. If we check this on, it means that we can take, for example, like the portrait image. This is not very applicable here in this case because we have the chair and the end table at the same level. But imagine if I am grabbing this chair and moving it further apart, I'm changing the camera view a little bit. And now I can use this eyedropper because I want to focus on objects. I want to focus on the end table and reduce the focal stop. When I do the reduction like this from 2.8 to 0.5, for example, let's run the render image. As we can see the render here, if we zoom in, you can see that the end table and the lamp is well focused. But further away, the chair is blurred, and this is like the realistic photography depth of field. With that, we can also create more dramatic and more photorealistic renderings. Anyway, apart from the perspective camera, we do have other options. For example, we have the orthographic camera and the panoramic camera. If we change the camera type to orthographic, as if we just move the scale of this camera a bit bigger with a bigger number, you can see that I'm moving this further away from what we used to have. And you can see that the legs on the end table, they are of the same size. And this is the orthographic view. Remember the orthographic view? That is how we usually look at the viewports. With the perspective view, change to orthographic view. Any of the 3D artists that are creating orthographic view or orthographic camera, we call it isometric scene. You can have a search on Google and they are very cute. They are like a cube from the orthographic view. Things are easily modeled, easily textured. They are not very detailed, but they are enough to give you the information of the scene and the environments. Now, after that, we have the panoramic camera, which is the camera that you can render panoramic images for virtual reality or VR tour. But to have this set up, we have to change the panorama type to equirectangular type. When we do that, we have to also change the resolution of the X and Y to the ratio of 2 to 1. To have it very clearly and very easily, I will start with like 4,000 to 2,000. Remember this ratio. We have to render this specific ratio to achieve the perfect panoramic rendering to wrap around a sphere. Remember that if we increase the resolution on the rendering, it also takes more time. You may recall that we have the time limit of 3 minutes, but these are for one tile. And as we do the rendering of a bigger render, we are breaking the render into smaller tiles. And for each one, we are spending 3 minutes. For example, if I'm rendering an image of the resolution, usually I like to use 9,000 to 4,500. This is very large, and I usually have to spend 45 minutes to render one image. If you're working on a scene and you will want to create a lot of different renderings, make sure you do the calculation carefully, because if you have a deadline to run, you have to see if you have the time sufficient for rendering. Congratulations! You have now reached the final episode of Blender tutorial with Dr. Hawthorn. And after these 5 days, I hope you have the basic knowledge of using Blender from modeling to rendering. As you have seen throughout these 5 episodes, we have a lot of things that we have yet covered. So stay tuned, and we will have more tutorials coming up. Thank you very much again, and see you around. Bye!